There are moments that just arrive, completely unannounced. No warning, no prep time, just a quiet whisper in the dark that completely changes the path of everything that comes after. This is the story of a night that started out just like any other. Routine, forgettable, the kind of evening that just melts into the blur of ordinary days. Except, on this night, something whispered, something invisible, something that rewrote a man's entire existence while he wasn't even paying attention. This is the night a whisper changed everything, and he never, ever heard it coming. His name was Daniel, 41 years old, an architect at a firm that designed office buildings and apartment complexes. He was good at his job, made a steady income. It was a career that gave him security, but zero passion. He'd stopped caring about the why behind his designs years ago. Now, he just gave clients what they wanted. Functional spaces that met code and stayed on budget. Nothing that would be remembered. Nothing that mattered beyond the transaction. He lived alone, and had for 6 years, ever since his divorce. He wasn't bitter about it, just resigned. The marriage had been fine, right up until it wasn't. There was no big dramatic ending. It was just two people who'd built a life together, and then one day they looked at each other and realized they were strangers who just happened to share a mortgage. They divided up their assets with the same cold efficiency they used to use for household chores. Clean, practical, emotionless. His apartment reflected that same practicality. Minimal furniture, neutral colors. Everything was chosen for function, not feeling. He never had guests over. It wasn't a home. It was just a place to sleep and sometimes eat. Just shelter. He didn't even wear cologne. He never had. He just thought it was unnecessary. Another thing to remember. Another decision to make. He showered, used soap, and that was good enough. Scent was for people who cared about making an impression, and he'd stopped caring about that somewhere along the way. The dinner wasn't even his idea. It was for our colleagues. Retirement, one of those mandatory get-togethers where just showing up is more important than actually being present. Daniel had thought about bailing. He even made a list of good excuses, but his manager had mentioned it twice, and the subtext was crystal clear. Show up, or your absence will be noted. So, he went. The restaurant was downtown, one of those trendy places that tries a little too hard. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, craft cocktails with ingredients you can't even pronounce. Daniel arrived exactly on time, not early enough to seem eager, but not late enough to be rude. The perfect sweet spot for a professional obligation. The private room was already half full of colleagues he recognized but didn't really know. People he'd worked next to for years without ever having a real conversation. Everyone was performing the same social dance, smiling, laughing at just the right moments. All pretending this gathering was meaningful instead of mandatory. He made a beeline for the bar and ordered a whiskey. Neat. The bartender was young, covered in tattoos. The kind of person who you could tell was working this job as a temporary solution to a permanent sense of uncertainty. She poured his drink without judgment and slid the glass across the bar with practiced ease. "Rough day?" she asked. "Rough decade," Daniel replied, surprising even himself with the honesty. She just smiled, not with sympathy, just acknowledgement. "Those happen," she said. He was about to turn away when she said, "Wait." She reached under the bar and pulled out a small, dark glass bottle. No label. She held it out to him. "Someone left this months ago. It's just been sitting here ever since. Something about it made me think of you. Don't ask me why. Just a feeling." Daniel looked at the bottle, then at this bartender he'd never met, who was offering him something that made absolutely no sense. He knew he should say no, go back to the party, and stop having weird interactions with strangers. But instead, he asked, "What is it?" "No idea," she said with a shrug. "Perfume, maybe? Or cologne. I've never opened it. I just knew someone was supposed to have it. And seeing you tonight, it just feels like you're that. Someone." He took it. He slipped it into his jacket pocket without a second look, thanked her, and returned to the party with a whiskey in one hand and a total mystery in the other. The dinner went exactly as he'd expected. Speeches about dedication and service. Mildly funny anecdotes. The retiree looking both relieved and completely terrified about all the unstructured time ahead of him. Daniel just went through the motions. He clapped when others clapped, laughed when laughter seemed to be required. He was there in body, but completely absent in every other way. Later that night, back at his apartment, he emptied his pockets onto the bathroom counter. Keys, wallet, phone, and the bottle. He looked at it properly for the first time. It was made of heavy glass, so dark you couldn't see what was inside. A simple silver cap. That was it. No brand name, no clue what it was or where it came from. He knew he should throw it away. You don't keep anonymous substances from strange bartenders. You certainly don't put them on your body. Basic safety screamed dispose of it. But something made him open it. The scent that came out was barely there. Not strong, not obvious. Just a whisper. It smelled like a memory before you can put it into words. Like the feeling you get when you walk into a room and forget why you're there. Like Der Bubatas a Fragrancy. It smelled like something he'd forgotten. Something important. Something that had been slowly erased over years of practical decisions and safe choices. He put a tiny bit on his wrist, just to see what it was. Just because the alternative was going to bed and waking up to another identical day in a life that had stopped meaning anything years ago. The scent settled into his skin. He didn't sit on top of it. It became a part of his chemistry. He went to bed wearing it and slept more deeply than he had in months. He dreamed in colors he didn't remember were even possible. He woke up feeling different. Not necessarily better, just different. Different, more aware of his own body, more conscious of the space he was in. It was like something had shifted in his relationship with his own physical existence. Like that whisper had said something to him while he slept, and now he couldn't unhear it. At work, he went through his morning routine on autopilot. Coffee, email, the daily stand-up meeting, but something was off. His usual tolerance for meaningless tasks felt completely gone. The project he was working on, another generic office building, another soulless box designed to maximize profits, suddenly felt unbearable. A colleague stopped by his desk. "You seem different today." Daniel looked up. "Different how?" "I don't know," she said. "More present. You usually have this checked out quality. Today you're actually here." Daniel didn't know what to say. He just went back to his work. But her comment stuck with him. Had he really been that obviously absent? Had everyone noticed he'd just been going through the motions for years? In the afternoon meeting, while they were reviewing the plans for that office building, something inside him just broke. The lead architect was presenting, talking about efficiency, maximizing rentable square footage, delivering what the client wanted, and then Daniel heard his own voice cut through the room. "This is wrong." The room went silent. The lead architect looked confused. "What's wrong?" "All of it," Daniel said. "We're designing a space where people will spend 40 hours a week, and we haven't thought for 1 second about what it will feel like to exist there. We're creating a container for bodies, without thinking about the humans who'll occupy it." His manager's expression was carefully neutral. "Daniel, we've been over this. The client has specific requirements. The client doesn't know what they actually need." Daniel interrupted. "They think they want maximum efficiency. What they actually need is a space that makes people want to be there. A space that acknowledges they're alive, that treats them like more than just units of productivity." He just kept talking about natural light, about proportions that felt human instead of industrial, about materials that aged beautifully instead of just cheaply, about creating spaces that served people, not just processes. By the time he finished, everyone was just staring at him, not in a hostile way, just surprised, like he'd just revealed himself to be someone they didn't even recognize. His manager called him into his office after the meeting. Daniel expected to be reprimanded, maybe even fired. Instead, he got something else. "That was either a career suicide or the best thing you've ever done here," his manager said, leaning back in his chair. "I'm not sure which yet, but it was real. The first real thing I've heard from you in 5 years. Where did that come from?" Daniel couldn't explain it. He could unsay that a bartender had given him a bottle with no label, and now he was wearing something that made silence feel like dishonesty. Something that made just pretending to be competent feel like a betrayal. Something that made it impossible to keep acting like the work didn't matter. He kept wearing the scent every single day. He didn't even consciously decide to. It just became part of his routine. It was like that whisper had become a part of him. And stopping would mean losing something he'd only just rediscovered. His work completely changed. He started pushing back on projects that were purely functional. He started fighting for designs that considered the human experience. He started having arguments with clients about what they actually needed versus what they thought they wanted. Some clients fired the firm, but others listened, and the ones who listened got buildings that people loved. Spaces that felt intentional, that made the people inside feel seen. Buildings that proved architecture could be both practical and meaningful. 6 months after that dinner, Daniel was called into the managing partner's office. He was sure he was getting fired. His recent behavior had been borderline insubordinate. He'd been difficult, demanding, unwilling to compromise on things that used to be non-negotiable. But instead of firing him, the managing partner offered him a new role, leading the firm's residential division. Smaller projects, more creative freedom, less profit, but a lot more meaning. Projects where the human experience was the whole point, not just an afterthought. Daniel accepted, not out of ambition, but because the thought of designing another soulless box while wearing that scent felt impossible. The whisper wouldn't allow it. His personal life shifted. He started saying yes to social invitations he would have declined before. He started having conversations that went deeper than the surface. He even started dating someone he met at a community meeting about urban development, someone who cared about cities as living systems, not just real estate markets. She noticed the scent. That's unusual. What is it? No idea, he said. Someone gave it to me. I've never been able to identify it. It suits you, she said, searching for the right words. It makes you seem like you're actually here, like you're not just going through the motions. The same observation his colleague had made, the same recognition that something had changed, that the person he used to be faking competence without caring had been replaced by someone present, engaged, and unable to pretend anymore. A year after he got the bottle, Daniel went back to find that restaurant. He wanted to thank the bartender, to ask her how she knew what was in that bottle. Where did it come from? But the restaurant was closed, out of business. He asked the neighboring shops, but no one remembered a bartender matching his description. The building's new tenants said the space had been empty for months before they moved in. Daniel stood on that street corner, holding the bottle now half empty end. He understood that it didn't matter if any of it had been real, whether the bartender ever existed, whether the scent was anything more than a placebo. What mattered was that something had whispered, and he had listened, and everything that came after was a consequence of that listening. He still wears it, every day. He watches the level of the liquid slowly go down, knowing that eventually it will run out. And when it does, he'll have to decide whether to try and replace it or just accept its absence. But that's a problem for the future. For now, it remains his daily reminder, not of that night, but of what that night triggered. It was permission to stop performing, to show up, to care again about work that mattered and relationships that meant something, to exist with presence instead of just going through the motions. That night, the whisper changed everything, but not through magic. It was through permission. It was a catalyst that made it impossible to continue being absent. It forced him to choose between showing up for his own life or suffocating in the one he'd been performing. Some people go their entire lives without ever hearing that whisper. They stay checked out. They keep performing competence without caring, building careers that provide security but no meaning, living in spaces that shelter their bodies without ever considering their souls. Daniel had been one of them. He would have stayed one of them. He would have continued right up until retirement delivered him into that same terrified relief. He'd seen in his colleague decades of being present without actually being present, a life that looked successful from the outside but was completely hollow on the inside. The whisper interrupted that trajectory. It offered an alternative. It showed him that presence was possible, that caring wasn't a weakness, that you could be both practical and passionate if you just refused to treat them as opposites.